If you've been playing Battlefield 6 recently, you might have noticed this yourself or heard people complaining about bloom. Bloom is effectively the randomized bullet spread you get when firing on a target, and in this case, what people are referring to is when you aim down sights and the deviation from where your gun is pointing versus where the bullets are going. It has been one of the biggest problems in the game, and it's been something that we can't really accurately measure until now. I've spent the last couple of days testing the bloom on every single gun, trying to find a way I can deliberately show which guns are affected more by the inaccuracy caused by bloom, and I have found a system that I believe is the best possible way to do it. I recorded myself firing every gun in the firing range. Same magnification, same FOV, same location. I tested burst firing, I tested this one moving, I tested this one standing still and spraying. I then located the most straight tracer, placed it in a Photoshop template that I made, and figured out the exact pixel distance from the center. I put all of these findings into a table, and I'm going to share with you guys all of my results, along with my general thoughts on how I rank the weapons in the game and how I find the different bloom on these guns in the game, because there are some factors outside of the raw spray bloom that I think are worth mentioning as well. And as I said, this took a couple of nights of testing. Thankfully, I had gamer subs to keep me going through the night, and tastes just like a rank up. It's healthier than a typical energy drink. It's super tasty. My personal favorite flavor has been the BBL flavor. It tastes blue. It's already much cheaper than your typical energy drink, but if you use code ottr, you get 10% off today. And if you use the link in the description, you can actually order 3 free sample packs to try it out for yourself at, again, absolutely no cost, not even shipping if you put code ottr in the cart. Anyways, let's dive into the science. So starting off the bloom list, we have the NVO228E. This is the gun with the heaviest bloom when you fire it as a full spray, as well as if you are strafing. What's interesting about the NVO, which you will see for a few different guns, is that there didn't seem to be a noticeable difference, if any difference, in the bloom, whether you were strafing or if you were standing still and full spraying. It seemed to have the same max bloom either way. Now, the minimal bloom could be different on these, or the middle of the ground bloom could be different. And I'm just gonna say this once, because I manually counted these out. If I wanted to figure out the actual average bloom, I'd have to have a perfect recoil and probably use AI to count it. And I don't know how to do that. I'm not that smart. So we're just gonna go for the max bloom, and it will still be indicative of how strong the bloom is on your weapon. You guys are gonna see that it is pretty much what you expect for a lot of weapons if you played with all of them like I have. Now, the NVO doesn't have the best damage, and that with this bloom, that kind of means that it's not really that good of a gun in general, I'd say. It doesn't have any bloom if you burst it in what I found to be about shots of 3, but anything past 3 shots and it starts blooming, so it's up to you if you guys want to use it. I already didn't like it that much, so I remain unconvinced. Overall, I don't think assault rifles rank that highly on this list. Next up is another assault rifle. That is the TR-7. Now, this one was a bit difficult to measure because it probably has the heaviest recoil in the game, and I haven't leveled it up yet. But from all of the testing, it has about 10% less maximum bloom versus the NVO. What I did notice was that the moving bloom was significantly higher on the TR-7 compared to other guns. It was about a 42% increase in the bloom between standing still and spraying with the TR-7 or moving with it. So with this one, you definitely don't want to be strafing while shooting. You can obviously offset with some attachments, but that is a pretty hefty amount. Next up, we have the G36A1. This one was a bit of a surprise to me because I used the G36 in beta, didn't feel like it was a problem, and then I used it on live and I realized, wait, I'm not hitting anything. And I've always said that the bloom is really harsh. Turns out there is one thing I've been doing differently here, which we're going to mention later on, but we might as well mention it now, which is that your bloom is actually harsher if you start shooting before you finish the ADS animation. If you are already hip firing and going to ADS, then you're just going to have like max bloom off rip. If you're transitioning from hip fire to ADS in that animation and you shoot before that ADS animation is fully finished, you will also have max bloom. And the G36 in general has a slower ADS time, which caused it to actually just be very inaccurate for me personally, because I think I just shot too early. If you factor that in and you wait for the animation to finish, it actually has quite a tight spread overall. Both standing still and moving has pretty much the same, as I call it, the pixel score on the maximum bloom. And what's interesting about the B36, at least from the slight testing I did, is that it actually does burst quite well. You can get maybe 5, maybe 6 bullets off, assuming you have decent recoil control, without the bloom really kicking in and messing with your accuracy. Next up, we have the M433. This one did surprise me because it definitely has been shooting wildly. Maybe it works the same way as the G36, but the M433 also has pretty high recoil by default, so that messes with things. It has a pixel score of 26, so that's slightly smaller than the G36 when standing still, but when you are standing, I found that it has a wild bloom at 39. So using the M433 without any additional attachments, spraying and then just strafing leads to wild bloom that just makes it hard to control in addition to the recoil. As for bursting, this took about 3 shots to actually get off. Next up, we have the AK-4D. This one has an even smaller bloom than the M433. I'd say that when looking at this scale, we're looking at about like a 10% decrease every single gun. So we're just gonna, no point in mentioning it, I think. But I will mention the pixel score, which I have as a 24 when you're standing still and spraying. And when you are strafing, it has a pixel score of 32. So it has a similar standing still score as the M433 that we mentioned. But when you are moving, it is actually a little bit more forgiving than the M433, which was pretty wild. That being said, compared to some other guns in this list, the moving score is still quite high. And it takes about, I found it to be about 4 shots before the bloom starts kicking in when you are bursting. Next up, we have the M277. This gun has a pixel score of 24, which is actually the same as the AK-4D. The problem is it has a very high visual recoil, so tracking with this thing is very confusing, but the bullets do go where the gun points. It does work in that way, mostly. What's interesting with the M277 is that the moving bloom and the standing still spraying bloom seem to be pretty much similar, with a score of 24 and 26. I'd account for some deviation, especially when moving, because we are moving, so it's gonna mess with the calculation a little bit. But I would say that 24 and 26 is close enough with everything else considered that I would consider it to be pretty much the same. And you could fire about 3 shots off of them 277 before bloom became too much. Next up, we have the DRS-IAR. This one I know from experience that it's really annoying to shoot. And now that we found out about how you need to finish ADS animation before shooting, I realized that a big part of my problem with the gun is that I probably shot before I finished the animation because it has a slower ADS animation than a AR. It has a pixel score of 22, so slightly faster than M277, and a moving score of 32. So there's a very clear discrepancy here between standing still and a strafing. Obviously, you want to stand still, and obviously you want to finish ADS before shooting, and this will significantly improve your accuracy. I found it to be about 3 shots in a burst before it started being very inaccurate. The bloom. Next up, we have the cord. A lot of people have told me, hey, the cord is the best gun ever in Battlefield 6. You should only use the cord. It is the meta gun. It is the best gun. This thing is the bee's knees. Well, I never thought it was that good personally. DPS is not amazing. It's all right, I guess. The bloom is not evidently so as good as people have hyped it up about. I was right at the end of the day, I guess. What we found was that the pixel score, the bloom and the cord was 21 for standing still and 31 for moving. So pretty much similar to the DRS-IAR, which is, it just doesn't shoot straight overall, in my opinion. It has a burst of about 3 shots. The first few shots do feel solid on this gun, but you know, as soon as you like commit to the spray, it just feels terrible. So what's interesting too with the bloom is that for some reason, we've seen pretty much mostly assault rifles at the top or at the start of this list so far, and we haven't seen an LMG until now on 9th place, where we have the M60. The M60 has a standing bloom of 21 and a moving of 29. So it does not have that much bloom overall. Obviously, we'll benefit from bursting. I took about 4 shots before the burst started like deviating with the bloom, but as long as you stand still and shoot, you should be pretty much fine with the M60. Next up is the RPKM. I actually quite like this gun. It has a lot of potential. We recently made a build on this on, well, where we post all the builds on Twitter and on our second channel. It has a standing still score of 21 pixels, but the moving score is quite harsh at 35. And it took about 3 shots to burst before it started getting out of hand. Next up, we have the QBZ-192. It's a carbine. What's interesting with most carbines is something that is, I guess, not that surprising now that I think about it. Their standing still bloom is very often similar to, if not the exact same as their moving bloom. The QBZ-192 has a pixel score of 20 when standing still and 20 when moving. That's right, you can strafe or you can stand still. Maybe recoil is different. I didn't test for that. I just tested for deviation from the iron sight. But with that in mind, you know, go crazy. Just play well with carbine. I don't think it's much of a surprise. Also, you could burst quite a lot with this, and you could get like 5 shots off before it deviated from the crosshair. So that's pretty good. Next up, we have the SGX, which has the same pixel score as the QBZ that we just mentioned. It also seems to be pretty much the same, if not the exact same, whether you go full spray or if you're strafing. Doesn't seem to matter. And you can burst about 4 shots before it gets out of hand. After that, we have a gun that I expected to be even worse, KV-9, which has an insanely high recoil, and it probably is the sway, honestly, that does it in. But as for the actual bloom, it only has a pixel score of 20. That's the same as the SGX. The bullets actually do mostly go where you are pointing. The gun just goes all over the place when you full spray. You really notice that it gets away from you when you're strafing, as it has a pixel score of 28. As opposed to a lot of SMGs, there is a discrepancy when standing still and spraying versus just straight up strafing and spraying. You can also burst 5 shots in a row with the KV-9 before the bloom gets away from you, but it's worth noting that it actually has a burst mode that you can just spam click, and it's essentially full auto and way tighter bloom bloom and basically no recoil anyway, so it's a pretty solid gun. Next up, we have the GRT-BC. This one is a beamer with pretty much the same moving and standing still bloom. For some reason, this test gave me a score of a 19 pixel score when we were standing still spraying and 17 when moving. This just shows that it's not fully perfectly accurate, I would say, or maybe there's something I'm missing. But with a score of 19 versus 17, I don't think that's enough of a difference to be worth bringing attention to. There could be a lot of factors that change that. You can burst 3 shots with the GRT-BC and still remain accurate. Next up, we have the SG-55ER. This one actually does a lot of damage. I was expecting it to be a bit more of a beamer, but I still think that a pixel score of 19 is fine. However, worth mentioning, unlike a lot of carbines, the SG-55ER does have a discrepancy between standing still and moving while shooting. If you strafe with this thing, you have a pixel score of 26, which is pretty hefty. That's almost the same level as, well, I have the exact number here, the M277, which was way farther back in this video or higher up in the list. You can burst 3 shots in a row with the SG-55ER without bloom becoming an issue. After that, we have the USG-90 with similar stats, but marginally better. It's probably like, it's no real difference between these, if I'm gonna be honest. It has a pixel score of 19 when standing still and 25 when moving, and you can burst about 4 shots before it turns bad. After that, we have the SCW-1, which is a gun I think we're all kind of sleeping on. The recoil is very controllable, the damage is pretty good, the bloom is very good, and what's interesting with the SCW-1, it is the highest DPS weapon in the game currently. Obviously damage fall off, but we're talking close range here. Compared to the KV-9, which was my previous favorite, is that the SCW-1 has pretty much the same standing still pixel score as moving pixel score, which means that whether you stand still or if you're strafing, it's gonna be similarly accurate at the very least when it comes to bloom. You can fire off about 3 shots with the SCW before it gets bad. And moving on, we have an LMG. So yeah, we're just finding all the LMGs as we go down the list for some reason. Interesting. The M123K has a pixel score of 19 when standing still and spraying, but 40 when you are strafing. If you strafe with this thing, it will not shoot straight. The bullets are gonna go everywhere but on the target. This is the second highest pixel score on this very list in this very video. Obviously, with the first one being the TR7, which is really interesting if you think about it. It's funny how LMGs overall seem to have a very low pixel score. They seem to be overall not that affected by bloom, even though you go full auto with them. And this is not using a bipod, it's just standing still with no scope. If you burst 2 times with the M123K, you can only really shoot 2 shots before the bloom gets too much. Next up, we have the SOAR 556 MK2. This one surprised me because I know from experience if you do full spray with it, it feels like it doesn't really hit that straight. Again, this might be a matter of, okay, yeah, the minimal bloom might be a little bit higher than the other guns. Again, impossible for me to measure from here, but it has a pixel score max bloom of only 18 when you stand still and about 25 when moving. So it is higher when you are strafing or moving. If you just stand still, it is going to be quite accurate. I think one thing that does you in is that the ADS speed is generally slow on this weapon. So a lot of people ADS and start shooting before the animation has finished. And maybe that is why the gun is mostly inaccurate for you as well. And the SOAR, you can burst with about 3 shots. Moving on, we have the M4A1. Yeah, we're all this way with 20 guns in the list, and now we have the M4A1. It has a pixel score, the same one of moving or standing still, of 18. So if you just stand still full auto, or if you strafe full auto, it should be similar bloom wise. And you can burst about 3 shots before it gets too much, which is interesting because it fires so damn fast, and the recoil is a lot to handle, and there's some sway to it. But I was actually surprised to find that the bloom itself wasn't that bad, and it just comes down to controlling the gun outside of that. Next up, we have the SL9. This is a beamer. It's an SMG and it's a beamer, and you guys would tell me all about it. I don't think the DPS is that amazing, but I find it interesting that it has a similar pixel score of 18 versus 20 from standing still or moving, and you can burst about 5 to 6 shots before it actually starts being really inaccurate. So before that, you're chilling. You can just burst in 5 or 6 or just full auto. The bloom is already quite low, so unless the target is very far away, you're usually going to be fine with just holding down your primary fire either way. Another weapon that doesn't do too much damage is the L85A3. This gun has a pixel score of 17, and when you stand still, it's 23. Just a marginally higher bloom when you are strafing, and you can burst 3 shots before it gets too much. But overall, it is pretty accurate, and the bullets will go where you are pointing. Next up on the list, we have the L110, another LMG, I know, with the same pixel score as the L85 when standing still. However, if you do strafe with this and you spray, we found that the pixel score seemed to be about 27. So the gun is a lot more inaccurate when you're moving. This is something you can offset with attachments. M250, another LMG, who would have thought? And this one is a beamer. I think it's interesting to know that the M250, I believe, has no real damage fall off across like any range. Does 25 damage per bullet, and when you shoot shooting firing range, whether it's the target farthest away or closer, it's going to be 25 damage, which is very rare for most weapons in this game. So when you combine that with the insanely tight bloom of a pixel score of 17 and a moving pixel score of 19, which is barely any difference at all, barely worth counting, you can see that it's going to be a pretty dominant weapon, a long-range beamer if you may. Maybe you could build this like an AR and just destroy everyone. We're gonna have to see once we get to it. You can only really fire 2 shots before the burst, before the bloom gets too much down. PW5A3, aka the MP5, has a standing still bloom of only 16, but a moving bloom of 32. But when you put a blue laser on it, this is a 20 MW blue laser. I didn't try with the more expensive one. It goes down to about 23 to 28 pixel score. After that, we have the PW7A2. This is the MP7, which doesn't do too much damage, but it also doesn't have that much bloom. When you're standing still, it has a standing still score of 16 pixels, and when you are strafing, it's 15. So you could say it's similar. It's about, again, about the same. I realized I forgot to mention this. It doesn't really matter with how tight the bloom is on these two guns, but for both the MP5 and MP7, you can fire about 4 shots before the burst becomes too much. After that, we have the KTS 100 MK8. This is a low recoil, low bloom LMG. Has a bloom score of 14 only when standing still and 16 when moving. I'd say it's close enough. You could say it's the same or very similar. And it takes about an 8-shot burst before it actually starts deviating from the iron sight. So I would say this is a very accurate gun in not just the recoil, but also the bloom. So I would definitely consider using this if I want an accurate beamer to hold down primary firearm. Next up, we have a gun that surprised me is the M417A1. This is a carbine with a standing still score of 13, just 13. Now, the recoil is a bit awkward to use, but once you get used to it, it doesn't actually feel all that bad. You can build it to lower the recoil, and then the bloom is pretty much fine, it seems. Obviously, if you start strafing, that's when you notice a big difference. It goes from 13 to 19 pixel score, but just stand still and you'll be fine. Or, you know, put a laser on it, put a lightened barrel on it. Additionally, you can fire a burst of 3 and you should be fine. Next up, we have the UMG40, which actually doesn't surprise me after having played with it, making a build, I think it was 2 days ago. It has a pixel score of standing still of 13. Moving is, however, 21, which is higher than the M417. I guess technically these should be flipped in the list. It's such a margin of a difference. I'm not sure if it matters too much. It does hit what you're aiming at, which is very important. And it takes about 4 shots before it deviates from the iron sight. And next up, we have another LMG. It's the M240L. Doesn't have the same like fall-off benefits, and I believe the recoil might be a bit higher. But we found a pixel score standing still of 13 and moving 15. However, the bloom starts being a problem pretty much instantly. You can shoot maybe 1 or 2 bullets before the bullets just start going everywhere, relatively speaking, as it has a very low bloom score, but it is worth knowing. And then ultimately, we have the AK205. This one was really hard to measure because the bloom was so low that most of them just went behind the crosshair. It has a bloom score of 9. It's the only one that was under 10, and the moving score was also 10, so it's pretty much similar. When bursting, it's hard to say because of how low the bloom is on this, and the sight does get in the way, but we found you could do about like, what, 10 bullets in a row or something, 7 to 10, before the bloom starts getting away from you. So you can just burst somebody down with headshots if you go synthetic route or whatever, and they're gonna die pretty damn fast. Insanely accurate gun. Honestly, not much of a surprise there. And that's the list. There's just a few things I want to mention before we round this video off. I think knowing to wait for your ADS animation to finish and then shooting will immediately make a lot of you guys just start hitting more shots. I do think keeping the bloom in mind and then comparing it to the damage output of the weapons will be very useful. It's good to use this whole thing, this whole project, as a resource to figure out how accurate your gun is. But it is no exact science because, as I said before, I wasn't able to get average bloom. I wasn't able to get important numbers such as the minimal bloom or, again, the average or whatever. I could just tell you how far the circle of the bloom goes. And in some cases, I want to argue that I did feel a difference even when comparing 2 guns next to each other that should have the same bloom score. But from testing, I would say that more or less this order seemed pretty accurate. And if you compare one of the bottom weapons on the list to one of the top weapons on the list, you are going to see a substantial difference in just how accurate they are. Ultimately though, bursting with the weapon, tap firing until the bloom starts getting away, and then resetting and tap firing again is going to be the more accurate way to use them. We did notice that ARs overall are very weak, like very weak, and because of the bloom primarily. The recoil is already quite harsh, the bloom is quite harsh. They definitely need a change or a buff. I know the devs I mentioned there are 2 bloom bugs in the game currently, so I don't know how well this video will age. I apologize if it comes out feeling a bit rushed. I just want to get this out there before the patch to inform you guys. We're gonna have to redo these tests afterwards, but now that I know how to measure for bloom, we can easily just apply this to other builds if I want to test for bloom. I have the framework in my head and on my computer, but this should give us a better idea of what to expect from the weapons. And for anyone else who is interested, the entire list is right here. Have fun. If you guys watched for this vlog, thank you so much for listening to my yapping. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and find this helpful. If you guys haven't already, make sure to subscribe, follow, hit all the buttons. Maybe check me out on Twitch when I'm streaming. Let me know what you guys think. Or join the Discord at discord.gg/ottr. Links right here or in the description somewhere. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time. Bye-bye.